Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of this series, which I've called Drawing Right. The title is slightly tongue-in-cheek because personally I don't believe in right and wrong when it comes to art, and you'll know this if you follow my art or if you've taken any of my lessons. But I was looking for a logical way to abbreviate the title of the book Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, which is a mouthful and hard to fit on my YouTube thumbnails. In this episode, I worked through the exercises from chapter 4, which are meant to help you switch from left-sided brain to right-sided, or L mode to R mode, and also to help you start to recognize this shift. I found this completely enlightening, not just in terms of the exercises, but also the text, which guides you and explains things. I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute, but first let me talk about the vases and faces exercise that you see me doing here. I was a bit confused by this exercise, I have to admit, but not in the way that the book predicts, because the book is adamant that you will have trouble with this from a mental perspective. It says you will experience mental confusion or conflict. I'm not sure if I did it wrong. Maybe I didn't activate L mode enough to then experience the conflict while doing the exercise. I don't really know. In any case, I did the exercise and I was fairly pleased with the result, and I didn't experience conflict. So, yay, boo. As an aside, which might be relevant for you to know, although this book and its method are completely new to me, I'm not actually coming at this process of drawing as a complete beginner. I know my usual art doesn't rely much on drawing skill at all, but I did take art as an exam subject when I was in secondary school, when I was 16, 17. Although I don't recall much in terms of learning actual skills or techniques, with the exception of my first year of secondary school when I was 12, when we learned to shade a sphere, did still lifes, and a self-portrait, like all the kind of traditional learning to draw exercises. My exam years were built around developing our own projects and our own expression, and I focused more on working with clay, photography, and film. But we did do some drawing and painting, so this all just to say that I probably unknowingly picked up on certain things that this book is teaching, even though I don't really know how to assess my level of drawing skills. The book talks a lot about R mode versus L mode in this chapter, and it puts some things into perspective to me. And possibly another reason the vase exercise didn't feel that difficult. Firstly, it made me think about making music. Music seems to me to be an activity that requires both modes simultaneously, especially if you read music rather than creating music intuitively. So that's something my brain has been doing almost all my life, in a very kind of hobby way, obviously. It also noted this funny thing that happens when you're doing a creative activity and you lose your verbal language skills. So this happens to me a lot when I'm demoing painting and trying to talk at the same time. I will honestly forget simple words like brush and pencil. It's always kind of frustrated me, but now I actually get why it happens. And by the way, this is why this is a voiceover and not me talking whilst drawing, because that would be a complete disaster. So now let's talk about the next exercise, the upside down drawing, which I was equal parts excited for and intimidated by. A quick note, I switched to a 3B pencil for the very practical reason that the HB pencil just didn't show up on film very well, and I want to make sure that you can see what I'm doing. I listened to classical music whilst doing this exercise. The book suggests that you can do this as long as you're listening to something without lyrics. It also suggests that you might find that the music fades out, and yes, I experienced this multiple times and it was so interesting. It then also helped me to make this connection to other times that this has happened to me. I really loved becoming aware of this left brain to right brain shift. Well, actually, it's the other way around. You don't really notice you shift from left to right, but you notice when left kind of quote unquote comes back, as it were. I think it's kind of like when you're falling asleep and waking up, that is kind of similar to those things. Because this actually happens in a lot of areas in life, and I love this new knowledge to carry with me and notice as I go about my life. In case you're not familiar with this exercise, you look at the example image turned upside down, and likewise you make your sketch upside down. This makes your brain look at what is actually there, such as lines, directions, shapes, rather than language-based concepts such as hands or a face, and it's meant to produce a much more accurate result than drawing things right side up. The process felt very methodical to me. I was worried that I would be bored, but luckily that didn't happen. I definitely felt conscious of wanting to get things right, and as I went along, I realized that it was hard to properly judge distances. It's so easy to make a line slightly too long or too short or at an angle that is slightly wrong, and these things then snowball and it's really hard to correct as you go along. I used my eraser occasionally, but mostly I just try to commit to the lines, even if later on I realize that they were off. I feel like there is a lot of value in learning to see what is wrong and why it is wrong, and the correction of what is wrong is kind of secondary. Ergo, I'm a bit lazy. I highly recommend it. There were several tricky parts to this drawing. Firstly, the first few lines were difficult. It was really nerve-wracking to make a start and to know that the correctness of the rest of the drawing relied a lot on those first lines. Secondly, I struggled with parts where a lot of shorter lines came together, especially if they were curved. I had a lot of trouble seeing the lines of the hands and fingers, trying very hard at that time of drawing them to not label them as such. I had to go through things very methodically, trying to get the curves right, leaving enough space for other lines and curves. It felt very hard, but in the end the part with the hands looked better than I expected. I thought I had messed it up, but it looked as if it all kind of made sense, which I think is a real testament to this method of focusing on the lines, shapes and curves and just methodically working through them. The book mentions that spending time in R mode feels almost timeless. You don't notice time passing or time until you come back to L mode. I noticed with this exercise, and it is something I've experienced before when painting and art journaling, and also when singing in my choir. As long as I can activate that mode of being, I feel quite confident that I can keep going with all this. My biggest fear about this project is boredom, which doesn't really exist when you're properly in R mode. I did a quick sketch of a coffee cup whilst I was in a cafe the other day, and I was bored out of my mind. I guess the fact that I don't particularly want to learn how to draw is a bit of an obstacle, but I'm still very excited to learn more about myself and my way of being throughout this process, because I feel like that's turning out to be an added benefit to this. It isn't just about learning how to draw, it's also learning about yourself. Interesting. So far so good. Episode 2 is in the bag. Before moving on to the next chapter, the book recommends doing at least one more upside down drawing. I haven't had time to do that yet, but probably will do that in my next drawing session on Friday. It's so helpful to have set aside a specific day to do this. It really makes me feel more accountable rather than leaving things up to chance or waiting until I feel like it, which, to be honest, would probably never happen. I highly recommend setting aside a specific day or a specific slot of time for it. I received loads of comments and emails from people who've just started with this book too, or have been meaning to try it. Lots of lucky library, thrift store and charity shop finds, which made me very happy to hear. I hope you found this episode helpful and motivating. I would love to hear how you're getting on. Please let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for being on this journey with me. It's really motivating to do it together. Wishing you lots of luck with your drawing session, and I will see you soon in the next episode. Bye!